Okay, starting to record. Okay, so I'm going to say hi to my MBA students. We've got Lisa Linden here. She's been a longtime friend. I was trying to think actually the other day about how long ago it's been. You came,
Probably like 2000.
yeah, because yes, when you came to Western, right? Was
Yeah.
2000? That was
Around 2001, 2000, something like that. Yeah.
that was so I came to Western in '99.
Okay.
And we had met prior to that at the Resort and Commercial Recreation Association conference. Was that one in was that Hershey?
Yes. That's when I became executive director.
Yeah, that's when we met. So anyway, Lisa's been a great advocate for recreation and hospitality and resort and other settings for a long time. And I thought it would be fun to ask her a few questions and let our MBA students, Lisa, hear about your experiences, a little bit of a different view than we've taken so far.
Okay.
You're specifically focused on the recreation aspect of a resort, and or not necessarily just a resort, but more broadly that way. And so Lisa, if you don't mind, just kind of giving us the spiel on who you are and what you've done and how awesome you are, or I can do that part of it, I guess. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I did my internship at Amelia Island Plantation. Now it's Omni Amelia near Jacksonville, Florida. And when I took on that role, they put me to the social part of their recreation programs which dealt with kids. And I think when I look back at that, when I went, I really didn't want to spend the whole summer with kids. However, looking back at it, I think it was the smartest thing for me because if you can program for kids, you can program for any age group. I just find that later on, if you've been programming for adults, it's hard to go back because I think adults forget that they were once kids. So if you stay with that mindset and you're a kid your whole life, it's all good. Because adults are kids just with a different mentality at times.
Yeah. Is that why people call me immature?
Right. Hey, as long as you're having fun, that's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So that summer really kind of drove me in the direction and where I still am today, which is kind of still exciting. But then my dream, because I grew up watching The Love Boat, was to work on cruise ships. And so after my internship, I went out to the conference that Resort and Commercial Recreation Association hosts out in Oregon, and where we left our resumes with different properties that we were interested in. But there was one cruise ship line there, and that was Norwegian Cruise Line. And that's when I met Sally Evans. And out of all the different places, that was the one interview I really wanted. And I was accepted to have that 20-minute interview to put your best foot forward, give it all you got. And I think the crazy question that came back to me was, if she was able to walk over to Jim Roush, which was my director at Amelia Island, and he would describe me in 3 words, what would they be? And so it was like, wow, thank God I had a decent internship and I didn't go crazy or whatever. So obviously that was a pretty intense question. And my other question that sticks with me today, and I always ask students looking to get their internships with one of the properties that I know of, is you're placed in a room with 30 kids for 2 hours and no supplies. What do you do? So it really kind of makes you go back to being a kid, and what were those games that you played growing up, whether it be tag games or, trivia questions or sing-alongs, whatever it is, you just can't use any supplies. So fortunately, I was hired on as a seasonal youth and teen coordinator on Norwegian Cruise Line. And so I started off going a week over Thanksgiving, 3 weeks over Christmas, a couple weeks in February, and then Easter, and then the summertime. And after a year and a half of doing that, I was hired on full time. So I spent 3 months on, 1 month off the ship. And my main job was working with kids and teens, ages 3 to 17. and we would break them up 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. During high season, we would have tweens, that 11, 12, 13-year-old group, and then the 13 to 17-year-olds. And we were also a part of the cruise director staff. So I got to call bingo, where I'd stand at embarkation or debarkation and wish the passengers well and all that good stuff, taught line dances, some of the, out of ordinary but fun recreation activities. But after about 5.5 years, I decided I wanted to get my land legs back, and I went back to a RCRA conference, which I had done during ship life if I was on land during conference time. But I went to a conference and I met a couple of people, and one of them did team building and special events out of Orlando. And so I ended up interviewing with them while at the conference, and fortunately I was hired on. And so I moved to Orlando. And Orlando's a great place to visit for me, just not a place where I wanted to live. So after close to a year, I decided I was going to move back to the Midwest, because that's where I'm from. And I missed home, but I wanted to still venture out, and because I had the travel bug. After that, another lady who I had interviewed with while at the conference, she is an operations consultant, and she does contract work with several different properties around the world. And she had touched base with me and said, it's a whole different avenue of commercial recreation. You would be paid only per contract, and you'd have to get on your own insurance. And so it's risky, but it's also, she goes, I will try to keep you busy, moving forward. And I ended up going to Barbados Sandy Lane Resort as one of my first properties, and worked there over Christmas and Easter. And then I went to Mauritius over in the Indian Ocean and worked with 5 different properties. And over the couple of years that I worked with Meg, I don't know if you've ever met Meg, Kevin, Meg Crute, Meg McElroy.
I know the name. I don't know that I would put a name to a face if I saw her, but.
Yeah, so I worked with her for a few years, and during that time, it was also, we got a contract at Atlantis in the Bahamas, and we worked with their kids programs. And then when they were building the Royal Towers, another addition to the resort, they decided to partner with Discovery Channel Camp for the kids. So they brought Meg and I in to do the recreation and the operations side of the kids club, and then they brought Discovery Channel to do all the educational programs. Edutainment. You educate the kids through entertainment, which I absolutely love. So while I was there doing that, a couple of my friends from cruise ships got a contract to come in and start a guest activities program. And so that's when I was reunited with Pam Petcash and Amanda Feltz and a few others. And so when I finished that contract, that team started to bring me in on the side during holidays. And hell, I was Tom the Turkey, I was an Easter Bunny, I became Mrs. Claus. I had several different roles. We did carnivals there, and then with Meg, still doing work with her, she decided that she was going to take a break. And at the same time, RCRA was looking for a new executive director. So I thought, what the heck, you know what? I'm going to give it a try, and I'll learn as I go along, and I'll figure it out. So that's when I took over as executive director with RCRA. But at the same time, I was able to still contract over holidays or things like that. So I stayed in touch with Pam and Amanda at Atlantis. And then as my 3-year contract was coming to an end, let's see. Yeah, sorry, I don't want to sidetrack just yet. They asked me to come down for a couple other events. And at the same time, I met one of their senior VP of events and entertainment, and who does movies on property at Atlantis, as well as concerts and press junkets and things like that. And so I started doing work for two sides, the recreation side and the event side. And while I had been doing that, they came to me and said, would you like to move down here permanently and become director of guest activities? So that's what I did. In 2005, I moved to the Bahamas,
Right.
and I stayed there until 2010. And during that time, I was director of guest activities. So I had the kids club, I had the teen nightclub, I had the movie theater. And then along with our division, we also had poolside activities, indoor bingo, things like that. We created a pottery studio, a library. So it was pretty extensive recreation program. And when my dream, actually my second dream after working on cruise ships, was when my boss came to me and said, all right, Mr. Kersner is going to put $6.5 million for a kids club. What would be your dream kids club? And so I thought back of, oh my gosh, growing up, let's do, a little Victorian house, girls' room for the tea parties, a construction area for Lego builds and more for the boys. And then in the middle, we'd have like a mini grocery store where they could go to the grocery store with the carts. And then we had a little, and this was our imagination area. And so we had a little library talking tree that would tell the stories for the kids.
Wow.
And then we did a culinary kitchen within Atlantis Kids Adventures, and as well as a tech room with the computers, and then a game room with all the video games. We had wheat trees, all of that. And then we had a performance area with a stage, a dressing room. And so it was like an 8,000 square foot kids club with a lot of imagination and a lot of programming involved. But that was probably, to this day, it's my dream come true of creating that amazing kids club.
This sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, the hardest part is when you work international. Some countries will say, we're bringing in expatriates to come and teach the locals to take over their positions. So after 5 years, they thought that I had been there long enough, and they said, we're going to have a Bahamian take over as the director. And so I knew I was going to be leaving the Bahamas. And at the same time, before the kids club had opened, my boss just said, can she stay for the opening for 3 months to get us started, so we don't lose her vision? And so in 2010, I left. And at the same time, I had done the grand opening for the Atlantis over in Dubai, Atlantis the Palm. And so I knew the team over there, and they heard that I was leaving the Bahamas, and they wanted me to come over and be the rec director over there. And I said, my mind is set to go back to the Midwest, but
Right.
if you ever need, someone to come in and do some consulting or contracting, I'd be more than happy to do that, or help you find a rec director that would be a perfect fit for you. And about a month later, they called and they said, would you be willing to come for 2 months, train the new recreation director, get them Kersner mindset, and kind of revamp the programs. So that's what I did. I went to Dubai for a couple of months, and while I was there, another guy who had worked in engineering at Atlantis, this is where you stay connected with good people, and they'll keep you in mind for future projects. He called from Anguilla, and he said they're looking for a rec director, and Anguilla's down by St. Martin in the Caribbean. And it's a small little island, but it's amazing. And he said, we're looking for a recreation director. And I said, you know what? I lived on an island for several years. I don't think I'm quite ready to move back. However, I'd be happy to come and do some consulting. And so I had an interview with the general manager, and he said, would you be able to stay through season? And I said, absolutely. So what I did is I stayed for 6 months, and I started their kids club, their recreation department, water sports, their pool decks, and beach staff. So it was kind of all under my reign. And then that was like in October through May that I stayed.
Okay.
So, which was an amazing experience. And when I got home, I was like, wow, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy contracting and consulting, and it's completely, it's risk take, I take risks, and you never know if you're going to have work at the end of one contract, but you can hope. And so when I moved back, another gentleman that had worked at Atlantis was working with Hard Rock International, and they were looking to standardize some of the kids programs within some of their Hard Rocks. And I think the crazy thing sometimes is when you look at some of these properties, they have their owners, but then they license with companies like Hard Rock. So if you look at the Hard Rock in Universal in Orlando, they're actually a Lowe's resort, but they have the Hard Rock name. So I started putting together a kids program, and then we revamped it because they wanted to add characters. And so we went back through the program and kind of it all comes to life when you have characters. I think it helps with programming as well. And so I have the whole manual for that. And now what I do for Hard Rock is whenever a property is opening and they want to add a kids club, it's Rock City Kids Club with the rock stars. And I go in and train and help them start their implementation and bring it to fruition. And I've been fortunate to travel to Ibiza, Spain, Mexico, China, Malaysia, and so hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, who knew that we had Hard Rocks, in those that many places, that diverse places like that.
Absolutely. And it's great because as they grow, they started out not so much a family type of resort. It was, young or people who are totally into music, and they're still keeping with that, but they're now knowing it's important to add families and have, kids, and actually add the music instruments to the kids club as well. So it's pretty awesome. I won't lie.
Yeah. So that's part of your current business right now, right? That you own and operate yourself, right?
Correct. Creative Recommendations. I started that in 2012, and it was right as I had another contract that I started with Constance Resorts, hotels and resorts over in the Indian Ocean. And I had known a gentleman when I went to Mauritius the first time with Meg, and we worked with Sun International. And now this guy he's the COO for Constance, and he said, we're going to revamp our kids club and we want to bring you in. And so every year now I go to Mauritius, the Seychelles, and Maldives. So I've been really fortunate with traveling with them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're all heartbroken at the number of airline miles you have.
Right. Now, if it was only with one airline, that would be even better.
Yes, that's very true. Okay.
In between, real quick, I've taken contract work as Battle for Atlantis, where I was the basketball team, like den mother. And so I've worked with Duke, Kansas Jayhawks, and Florida Gators. And I was kind of like their mom, and I set up all their appointments and workouts and things like that, and kind of walk them to, so little fun stuff like that. I did Nike World Basketball Festival, and I was Team China with high school Chinese students. So that was pretty awesome as well. So just constantly saying yes and getting experience in all different avenues.
Right. That sounds great.
Yeah.
So this part of our class that we're working on is around kind of the front of the house, working with guests, right? It could be those activities, but would you talk for a little bit about how you interact with guests, or how you train others to interact with, from kids to teens to adults, how you deal with quote unquote problem children, and those could be children of any age.
Right. Yes.
If you'd spend a little time just talking about that, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, just being prepared and giving yourself 15 minutes prior to an event. And if you want to put together a bin of your activities for the next day, just so you're calm inside. And if you do encounter some of the problem children or parents, you're prepared to kind of like have your activity ready to go, but also be calm and set for any other additional things that might happen during that time. And just, I think when I worked on cruise ships, it gave me such a great work ethic, because if you're not in your cabin, you are on show, and your name tag's on, and you're constantly working, saying hello to people and answering questions, whether it's the first time you've heard that question for the day or the 1,000th time. You're still on stage. And while we're standing at the doors, even when at that time, because ship life has changed a bit, we were able to go to the nightclubs or go to some of the shows. But you have to remember that you're still outside your cabin and you're still working. So that was a great training, knowing that working in resorts, it's the same way, but you also have an office to go to, so you can kind of, gather your thoughts. As far as, it's that 5 foot, 10 foot rule, where 10 feet, you notice the guest coming, 5 feet, you smile and say, how are you? It's keeping those little things in mind. But that being prepared and being there at your activity site 15 minutes in advance, going through your items and answering questions, or doing a behind the stage, coming up in 15 minutes time, our next activity is something like that. It keeps you kind of just focused on what your next move is. As far as parents and kids, I always tell my team, we're not babysitters. We don't sit and just, we provide high energy activities for kids. And if there is ever a child who disrupts the group, you can use a little bit of that peer pressure, and the other kids will back you up if you use it in the right way of saying, hey, we are all here to have a great time. If you're not interested in having a great time, I don't have a problem calling your parents and letting the parents know. You don't say your child's not the angel you thought she or he was, but I also still use a timeout if I need to. Obviously, with only 6 and older, I don't use it for the younger kids. But if a child misbehaves more than 3 times, and I've had to speak to them a couple of different times and kind of hold his hand or hold her hand or bring them with, or just correct them from disrupting, I will call the parents and let them know. And then I'll also say they're more than welcome to come back and join our program if they have a different behavior or positive attitude. Otherwise, they're not welcome back. And there's been a few cases where you have to be prepared to step up. But I will say this, what's easier is practicing speaking to the parents on positive notes of what great activities the kids did that day, and let your manager handle the challenged parents or kids. And then once you practice talking to the parents on positive notes, it becomes a lot easier for you to pass along a negative message.
Right. Perfect.
Did I answer any of those questions?
You did. How do you decide, as you're working with different kids, how do you decide on different approaches, right, from that kind of a perspective?
Yeah, I think, I won't lie, I do use sarcasm. Sometimes. No, never. Some kids won't pick up on it, and which is fantastic. Others get the point and they'll be like, okay, I got it. The older kids will get my message. But you do, after working with kids, you're always going to get those attention seekers, and you understand that they don't get the attention at home. So you have to be aware, but you also you can't play favorites. Right. And in some of the games that you play, you have to be flexible enough to change up or add rules along the way so that it's an even playing field. For instance, if we're playing Fruit Basket, which is a game where one person stands in the middle and calls out 2 fruits, and the kids will switch places, and that person in the middle has to grab a seat. There's some kids that like to stay in the middle. Right. And that's when you say, all right, if you're in the middle more than 3 times, you're out of the game. And so that pretty much will ensure that they're going to go find a seat so they're not kicked out of the game. Otherwise, if we're doing something, if we're out on the beach, you just always remember that you end a game on a high note. When the kids are at their happiest times and it's going great before kids start to get bored and throw in a bit of attitude, you end it, put that game in your back pocket and save it for later, because then it's a teaser, and later on that day they'll say, oh, can we play octopus? Or they'll come back to you and say, can we do more trivia? So you just leave it on a high note. And And what you can do is you get a bunch of filler games. Start collecting little games that will fill that time. Because if you know you've listed on your program, I don't know, I'll go back to fruit basket or octopus, or elbow tag or toilet tag. You know that if you only have 3 kids that show up, that game is not going to last an hour. So what are you going to do to fill the time? What other activities can you play? And that will keep the kids saying, oh, what was that game yesterday? But at the same time, it also allows them to say, oh, can I teach the rest of the group a game? And then that's when you add it to your little repertoire of creativity journal or wherever you're keeping your notes.
Right. Yeah, because you can't sit there and, you get done with an hour activity in 20 minutes and go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's all pick our noses. No, I'm just kidding.
You've got to have a plan, even if it's just stuff in your back pocket to be able to pull out and, maybe end up playing 4 other 10-minute games or something like that, right?
Yeah, when I do training, I call it masters of crowd control. And there's 3 areas where you want to be aware of is know the size of your group. How do you have enough supplies to host this group, or have your verbiage in your head of what you're going to say on how to share the scissors or the crayons, so there's no fighting during, I don't have glue, he has my scissors, so you can communicate that to the kids so that the size of the group. It's the same with the games. There's some games that you're going to play with 20 kids and some that are not going to work with 3 kids. A game called Categories, where you say everybody group with those who have the same birthday month as yourself. If you only have 3 kids, it's not really the best game to play.
Right.
The next one is know the ages of your games, because you want to make sure that you're playing age appropriate games. And for instance, if you say we're going to play Duck Duck Goose with a bunch of 9 to 12-year-olds, they're going to look at you like, are you kidding me? That's what we played when we were 4 or 5. But if you change it up and you play drip, drip, drop, and you've got a sponge and a bucket of water, and you play it the same way as Duck, Duck, Goose, you've changed it up. It's a little bit more challenging. The 9 to 12-year-olds don't mind getting wet, so it's pretty awesome because it's one of those fish games that we call inappropriately slimy hits that they love. So just know the ages of the kids that you're working with. And then the third one is know the disposition. Is it early morning? Is it late afternoon? You're not going to take kids swimming, whether it's a myth or not. You're not going to take kids swimming right after lunch. So just know the timing of your activities. And what you kind of want to do when you do program is you want to build it up to a peak. Always start a program with icebreakers. So it sets the tone, it breaks that ice, it gets kids to know one another before you actually start playing games or doing arts and crafts. And then as you wind down the day, you become a little bit more passive. So when you hand them off to the parents, they're ready to go. And yes, those are, yeah, exactly, wired and ready. And the parents are looking at you like, oh my God, what have you done?
I'm going to pay you back for that.
Right.
Yes.
And then at the end of the day, I always try and do like a fun trivia question where the kids have to find the answer and say, don't forget, if you do come back tomorrow and you have the answer, I just may have a small prize for you. So there's a little incentive, or I'm advertising for the next day's activities.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So kind of wrapping up here, just give me your passion is obviously, recreation in various settings. Give us your testimonial of that and why that's so important to you and to guests that recreation professionals might work with.
Yeah, I think when I first started out, I was a PR major and a rec minor. And within 6 weeks, I was like, I really like this recreation gig. And so I said to myself, I will stay in recreation as long as I can if everything goes well. Because even my parents were like, what is a recreation degree? What are you going to do for the rest of your life? Yep. And I think because I have been really, along with taking the risks, I've also been very blessed and fortunate to have met these people along the way and stay in touch with them. And I think if you're going to be, you can make this. I know sometimes it's hard when you're not like promoted to manager or director instantly, but if you stick with it and you have that passion and you want to make a difference, do it, because you can make a great living and you can also have fun at your job. And I think, you know, you talk to so many people when you're out and about, and 3/4 of the people, okay, maybe not 3/4, but close to it, always have issues and hate their job. I have to say, I love my job. And I always said to myself, when I'm getting tired or if I start complaining like some of my friends do, it's time to move along and change it up. And so being able to work with not only kids clubs, but also grand openings or different events that I've been fortunate to do has kept me really thriving and learning, and the industry is ever changing. And, you know, I just think it's pretty awesome, and it's a great industry to be involved with, and there's so many amazing people. And here's my cheap plug right now with RCRA. It's easy to pick up the association members and to say, hey, I've done a hayride for the last 10 years for Halloween. What other activities can I do? And they will share. Sharing is caring, don't forget.
And I can attest to the energy and love that Lisa has for what she does. I mean, we've known each other for almost 20 years, and you know, the opportunity for you know, what she loves and the passion and the energy that she puts into things is wonderful. So that's one of the reasons why I asked her to be a part of this little interview today. And Lisa, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me to do this, and I hope no one's fallen asleep.
I can't imagine.
Okay, great. Yay.
Right. Wonderful.
If I ever get out to Colorado, I'd love to come and see the class and meet them and answer any questions that they may have. And if you do have any questions after this and you want to email me, I'm more than happy to give you my 2 cents or whatever on any question that you have.
Perfect. So for the MBA students, you can let me know and I can give you Lisa's contact information, and we can go forward that way. So again, thanks, Lisa. Thanks, students. And have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.